This is Geek Gab, the Geekarific Gabfest with your host, Daddy Warpig, and my co-hosts, Dorrinal and RemipunX. We are back. That's right, the Geekarific Gabfest for Sunday, December 14th, 2014. All fun, no work, 1 hour of anything geekish under the sun. Our special guest today is Oliver Campbell, the infamous Three Dog. And I am going to begin this show with a confession. I always wondered from the very first time I got involved in Gamergate, you were there and you were posting like comments in the tags. I always wondered if you were really actually the Three Dog from Fallout 3, but I didn't have the balls to ask for like 3 months. I didn't say anything every time I saw your name. I always wondered, did he really do the voiceover for the video game? And then finally, like a week and a half ago, you said something about it, and I got up off my ass and went to IMDb and checked out Fallout 3 just to see if you were on the cast list or not. I think that's hilarious that for whatever reason I just felt so embarrassed. I felt like everybody else knew what was going on, but I didn't, and I would look so stupid by asking that I just couldn't ask the question. Thanks for coming on the show, and I will be I'll be nice and give you a chance to say hello to everybody. Oliver.
Hi.
Remy, Dorrinal, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
See, and this is a chance for me to like pull back and be quiet for a second and sip some water so I don't my throat doesn't get too hoarse.
Yeah, Daddy Warpig gives his all to us every week on that intro, and we should all be very, very grateful for it, though it's scary.
I'm sorry, is he still talking? I'm just going to go ahead because my ears are still ringing. I'm going to assume he's done with his introduction.
So how was everybody's week? What has everybody been up to?
I have a confession to make. It's funny that Oliver here's been talking about Assassin's Creed a lot lately. I have a backlog of Assassin's Creed games. I really enjoyed the first one because why not? You know, Prince of Persia with violence. And I'm sitting here and I haven't even finished the last of the Ezio games, and I've got all the other ones just waiting to be opened, still in shrink wrap. But you know what? I spend all my gaming time on Hearthstone. That's it. That's my deep, dark confession.
That's pretty dark and pretty deep.
I just on the subject of Assassin's Creed, just over some of the events that have gone down over the past week. For those in your audience that don't know, I used to be a game journalist, and my focus was really on editorials, just surrounding games themselves, not the political nature of things like that, but actually just looking at the art of the craft and focusing on game reviews and actually understanding how these things are put together and why. And I wasn't going to get back into it, but just some of the things that happened over the past few days really pushed me to the point where I said, all right, screw it, all my chips are in, and I'm starting up a new review process that's going to be a 3-part thing where when I sit down and review a game, and do a written review, I decided I wanted to do something completely different from what everyone else is doing and share that experience with the audience. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually sitting down with Assassin's Creed Unity, and I'm streaming the entire playthrough that I have with it before I sit down and do the written review. That way, because I don't see anyone else do this, they just kind of do little highlights or little quick shots or things like that, and no one understands how the reviewer came to their point of view and the conclusions that they did. And so that way I just kind of figured, well, when I sit down and I give this particular game a horrifying score, someone can sit down and go, well, let me look at his playthrough. Oh, no wonder you gave it that score. That is what I experienced. And we've been just kind of sitting here watching this and going through it together. And that's been really cool for me in multiple ways, because I'm not playing for fun right now. I'm playing specifically to be a reviewer, and so people are getting to see how I go about testing the walls, so to speak. I throw myself in the environment and I do things that someone might not typically attempt to do, just to see how stable the game is and things like that. And I've just been having a really interesting experience. I haven't reviewed a game in probably over a year now, and just getting back into the habit of it. And it's really weird. I've drawn in a pretty huge crowd because they see where I'm going, and I think that it's going to end up being successful. What I have ended up saying about Assassin's Creed Unity so far is that if somebody says this is the next generation of games, this is a horrible way to introduce them to it. This is the future. Well, it kind of makes me want to go back to Spaceballs. Like, fuck, even in the future, everything is broken. This doesn't work for me.
Just on that comment, it seems like a lot of the stuff I've experienced in the so-called, it used to be, next gen, and now it's current gen, I guess, has been just really, really buggy, and I haven't even gotten into Assassin's Creed. So yeah, I can only imagine. I just saw the pictures of it, and I'm like, I'm already sick of bugs and sick of patches and sick of games crashing and stuff. I can't even imagine, when they deliberately ship a buggy game.
That's what disturbed me. The only thing that people have not seen me do, and they have not seen me participate in the game, was just setting it up and installing. Like, that's the only thing that's not recorded. But before I even started the game, I downloaded a 3 GB patch, and I was mortified. I sat back and I looked at that and I said, I just downloaded an entire game's worth of bug fixes. Like, what is this? Like, it made my brain hurt. Like, it's one thing to go, well, old Nintendo games are smaller than most pictures, most picture files anymore. Well, it's different. Like, just looking, basically everything past the year 2000, starting from the PlayStation 2, things would take up several gig. What were we on? DVD 9 format on the PlayStation 2, Xbox, things like that. And I'm sitting here looking at this and just thinking that there are entire titles that I can download and have downloaded onto my PS4, and they are so stable. And they are just so incredible. Like, I just finished a whole playthrough of Transistor for the very first time just a few days ago. And it disturbs me to think that this much smaller developer with a title that's $14.99 just blew out, a AAA world-class tier developer where they're, charging so little for such a at least completed experience. And then I look at Assassin's Creed Unity, and I am seriously encountering major bugs every 3 minutes of play. Like, there's more talk about the bugs that are going on with my audience than there is about the content of the game, because it completely overshadows it. The comparison that I made was, I looked at this and I said, this is it's like a car. It's like a really beautiful looking, fast looking, great paint job, great finish, all that stuff. It looks like it's tricked out with all the coolest stuff, and then you realize the car has no transmission.
I bought my Xbox One, and one of the first games I bought was Dead Rising 3. And I popped that in, and it had a 25 gigabyte patch. 25 gigabyte patch. And that's not unusual. I've gotten that. In fact, most of the first 6 games I had were 25 gigabyte patches, or 20 or 18. And when I got one that only had a 3 gigabyte patch, I was like, oh wow, that's finally something something that doesn't make you want to scream. I guess I'd been conditioned to that. But yeah, that ticks me off, especially when I'm getting nasty grams now from my ISP saying, oh no, you're going above 250 gigabytes, you're in trouble, you're a heavy user. I'm like, do you know how quickly I could burn through 250 gigabytes?
I was experiencing the exact same problem. Like, it's kind of nice to be in a situation where somebody else has to deal with the same thing. Exact same thing. I have a cap of 250 gig, and I have not had any issues with approaching that cap over the past, couple of years now. But the second I got my PS4 and it started having crazy problems, I picked up Little Big Planet 3 when I first purchased the hardware, and I went to install it and all that, and the patch that I installed was 500 megabytes to start, and it turned into a nightmare scenario. Like just installing that game and patching it caused every other single game on my PS4 to stop functioning.
Oh god.
Yeah, so everything I'd already been doing, like I didn't just start playing it immediately. Like I waited like a couple of days after I gotten it, and then I was like, okay, let me go ahead and get in some time here and see what's happening. And it's just turned into a nightmare show. Like every game, no matter what, the second it tried to load anything, just boom, crash, crash, crash consistently. So I had to do a complete wipe of my PS4 and start over from scratch multiple times. So that's, 30, 40, 50 gig each time trying to troubleshoot this problem myself, and just boom, just burn through all my bandwidth for the month. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me.
I'm just I'm so appalled. I can't even say how appalled I am. I can't imagine doing that, because that would fill me with rage. I mean, that would fill me with controller snapping rage. I'd have to remind myself I was holding a $60 piece of equipment before I broke it against the wall.
Right, this isn't the old Nintendo days where you had a controller that could stand up to a nuclear blast. There's a lot of technology here. I'm like, damn, that's a couple of trips to the movies. Like, it's not that easy anymore.
Just want to say going to the movies is way too expensive. Attempted to do that today, and I was like, no. Let's go have a nice sit-down lunch instead. It'll cost less.
I saw a really good article about that on Flashback. They were talking about in the 70s where you had grindhouse movies and other movies that you could make for very cheap, get them out into the movie theaters, and they'd actually charge less for those movies than they would for big studio releases. And so it made it a lot easier. I know there's a complete digression, but what you're talking about is a great point, because it makes it a lot easier for people to be willing to take chances on, rom-coms or comedies or smaller horror movies or whatever. If the ticket prices are lower, they're more willing to go out and just take a chance at a movie that might be crap. Whereas if your ticket prices are $10, $12, $14, depending on where you go, what state you live in, people are only going to go see things they think are surefire hits. And that's why you've seen Hollywood switching over to huge big blockbusters, is because people just aren't willing to take that kind of chance on a B-movie horror movie that might be great, it might be fun, or it might just be absolute dog shit.
Well, I miss moving up here. I think everybody knows I'm in Western New York at this point. And and Oliver, by the way, I don't know why I do it, but I always bring up movies with this every stream. But I'm a little bit of a movie nerd. Back home in Washington, D.C., we actually had grindhouse cinemas. So we had movie theaters that would show B-run and indie movies that were just awesome. And I'm a huge horror nerd, so it was great because I could spend $5 a ticket, and certain days it would be $2 a ticket plus a bucket of popcorn, and could go and just see, double features and all sorts of fun stuff that were throwbacks to like the 70s style of cinema. And I miss that. Up here, I have to go to big budget movie theater with stadium seating and all of this really nice stuff, but it's kind of like, well, I could also just watch this movie in my bed on Netflix and pay a lot less for it. So makes me sad. I love going to the theater, though. That's my thing. I miss that kind of experience.
Yeah, you go to the right movie and you get the right crowd. It's more of a community thing. It's more of a shared experience instead of just most movies just aren't worth watching on my couch, if you know what I mean.
Mhm. Yeah, totally.
Oh, I'm absolutely a movie buff. It basically comes down to video games and movies in my house, just because of what I do as a storyteller, as a fiction author. It's, Tracy Morgan had commentary on that, and he said, how do you know how to be great if you don't study greatness? And so it's really important that I just consume all of that creative content, especially in imagination land when it comes to telling stories. And so that's why all of that is important. It doesn't matter the entertainment medium. I'm just there. And just as Remy was saying, it really is an experience. Like, I'd say probably one of the worst things that ever happened in my town was when they shut down the Dollar Theater, because you could go in and see things that had already been out for a long while and they're just running it late. But it's pretty awesome when you just walk into a movie theater and you spend less to actually watch the movie than you would on a popcorn at that point, you know?
Yeah, we have dollar theaters here. I've seen a lot of movies that I wouldn't have taken a chance on for full price that I was very happy to see for dollar movie, and even movies I love. I'm apparently one of the few people on the planet who liked Sahara. You know, sue me. I loved that movie. I thought it was a fun action movie, and it's got some of my favorite lines. But I saw it at the dollar theater because, you know, it's cheap. You can afford it. You can watch pretty much anything you want, and if it turns out to be a dud, who cares? You know.
Because you got the experience of going to the theater. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing is when the experience even outweighs necessarily what's being shown on the screen, and that's the value of going to the theater. I mean, I've seen movies that are, I mean, the Paranormal Activities movies are far from high quality cinema, but I will go and see if it's available in the theater. I will go and see it because there's nothing like watching those movies with an audience, especially like opening night when everybody's all amped up. It just makes it that much better of an experience.
Okay, I'm gonna break in 'cause I had a question I wanted to ask before we got too far. Are we still on for the super secret guest for next week?
We are. We are.
Okay.
Yes, we are. It's going to be, the conversation is going to be very much, we're going to talk about basically what it's like to work in the AAA world, way marketing and things like that works. Just general questions, nothing specific to where the person worked or anything like that. So if folks have questions that they want to ask somebody who is familiar with AAA, as you guys know, even though this isn't a Gamergate stream, I'm somebody who's very protective of our developers because I've watched what's been done to their careers in the last few months just by supporting us. And I have a friend who's willing to come on, answer questions about the industry, and answer questions about development. Since we had some awesome indie devs on with us already, I thought it would be cool to give a platform to folks who are in AAA. You know, and it's cool. I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, it's not going to be fun unless we know who it is. But I think it'll be interesting just to have the insight into the industry without a whole bunch of intrigue attached to it. So it'll be good times.
Because this is the question that Oliver's experience with the PlayStation brought up. It seems to me that this whole next gen or current gen, whatever you want to call it now, has taken a huge step forward in how fragile, and this is just my impression from the Xbox Ones, how fragile the games are, how buggy they are, and how easy it is to break stuff just playing through normally, and then how fragile the OS on the console is. And I'm just wondering if there is something, if it is just laziness and they're rushing things out, or if it's the companies that are,
Well,
aim towards something different.
I think a lot of that falls onto the publishers more than the actual developers themselves. I was talking to, I can't remember right now. It's one of those days. It's been a long day. But I was talking to somebody actually about this very thing. Publishers, unfortunately, especially because of contracts and things like that, they hold the reins and they hold the money. And if a publisher says, hey, I want this title that we just put out 6 months ago, I want another version of this game in this 6-month time frame, and they don't give proper time for testing and they don't give proper time for development, there's only so much. The thing that people have to realize, and that I try and be empathetic about, is that these folks are putting food on their table. You know, like they're working a job, and yes, it is something that we're very passionate about, and it's something they're very passionate about, but at the end of the day, all of us have to think about, if I was in that position, you know, how much power would I have to push back against this humongous powerhouse of a publisher? And some people become big enough names they can do that, but unfortunately most folks are not. So it's really a lot of that, I feel like, falls on the publishers' heads.
My question is, my wondering is because it's so universal, because it occurs in so many different games published by so many different companies, I'm wondering if there is something technological, something obscure that is problematic, a bug somewhere. I mean, I know for a long time a lot of weird crashes in the Mac OS could be traced to eventually bugs in drivers for the graphics cards. I think it was the NVIDIA graphics card drivers had a couple of small bugs in there because the system was offloading high-intensity tasks like compositing all the windows on the screen, that all went to the graphics card. So that meant that every single time you opened a window or moved a window or shrunk or grew a window or launched a program, you were hitting through that driver, and a bug there could cause weird instabilities everywhere, and you didn't necessarily know it. And it wasn't until they got updated drivers for the NVIDIA cards that things started to fall out with that, to where it wasn't as crashy. I'm literally wondering if there is some kind of, or if it's possible that there's some kind of technological issue that hasn't been focused on because, companies are busy doing stuff. They're busy publishing. They're busy, Microsoft, I'm sure, is busy trying to get the Xbox back up and being a competitor. I'm just wondering if in the course of development, if they've worked with that kind of hardware, next-gen hardware, enough to say, yeah, that's a reasonable suspicion, or no, it's just publishers pushing it out. I wasn't wondering about developers. It just is so universal. It kind of makes me wonder if there's some kind of underlying instability somewhere. That is as purely geeky as I tend to get on these casts, and you were here for it, Oliver. Congratulations.
Yay! It's happening.
I cannot believe I just talked about that.
Well, make sure you write it all down so you can ask next week. That's the thing. I wasn't taking notes, so yeah, that's. And I feel like, Ollie, I should grill you about publishing, but because you do. Is most of your stuff online publishing? Is that sort of the way that it goes now? I'm so not cool or versed in that world at all.
Yeah,
so.
it's surprisingly easy. It's far more easy than what one would think that it was. Again, I started doing that a couple of years ago, and people are like, oh, I need this, I need that. People think that they need so much stuff to do this. And it's funny because I sat down from, conception to finish and releasing that product, and I sat down and I looked at this and said, I didn't spend a single dollar to produce that content and put it out there. And it really is just such a smooth process. And I look at this and I say people are running out of excuses to not do that. And someone says, well, I want to be a writer, or I want to be an author. And I'm like, go do it. Well, I must need a bunch of money, or I need a very specific program. No, that's a line of crap. Here's what you need to be an author. You need to sit down, get a piece of paper and a pencil, and write. You need to sit down and you need to do that until your work is done. Finish what you start. And then from there, it's so ridiculously easy. I mean, the only scary thing is learning stuff that you don't know and all that other, gobbledygook. But just getting in there and actually getting it out, most of these resources are completely free. Going through the whole publishing process, so on and so forth. The only thing that I paid for, and that was my own personal choice, was to make sure that my works were available in regular retail stores, and that cost me $25.
So not painful at all.
No.
Who did you go with?
To get my work published, actually, go through CreateSpace. You would be surprised. And so my current book distributor is Lightning, and it's really interesting because I turned around and was just having a conversation with my little sister, and she's a huge book nut, and so she was going and she went into Half Price Bookstore, just looking for stuff. For whatever reason, every time she goes into a bookstore, it doesn't matter where she is, she goes looking for my book, and she actually found it on the shelf the other day, and I was like, holy cow, that's unexpected, but I mean, you can walk into Barnes & Noble and pick my stuff up just like that. If they don't have it in stock on shelf, they're like, oh yeah, we'll order that for you, no sweat. And it's seriously, it's think about that. Your absolute dream for somebody who's like, oh, I would love nothing more to be an author and have my own book right here in my hands on my shelf. Your dream is $25 away. What's the holdup?
And this is the thing, too. It's not just that there are the technological capabilities to do that. There are tons of resources available out there of authors who have done this and are doing it, who can give you advice on every single thing you need to know. It's on the web right now. You just need to go to their sites and look at it. I know Sarah Hoyt does a blog called According to Hoyt, and she's self-publishes or indie publishes a lot. And she will tell you on her blog, amongst all the various other stuff she does, she's very opinionated, a lot of politics, and culture and stuff. But in between that, she'll tell you about getting a good cover to put on your book, and what kind of what you need to do with your manuscript before you get it ready to print, and all of this good advice. And she's not the only one. That's just one person. There are dozens, maybe hundreds of actual published professional authors who put out all of this advice for free. That all you have to do is exactly what you just said, Oliver, is sit down and write, and then pay attention to people who know what they're doing, and they will tell you how to go through these steps of making sure your manuscript is publishable. That doesn't mean publishable in the sense that anybody's going to want to read it, but making sure you get it out there and do the best you can, and you don't have a nasty, ugly-looking cover that makes people just not want to read it. There's so much material available.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I do or not what I do, I'm sorry. One of my sayings is that, right here, right now, in this time, this place, it's 2014, rolling into 2015. We are almost 15 years into the 21st century. Right now, on just standard in these civilized countries, first world countries, we all have more access to more information and resources than any individual person has had in the history of mankind. And people absolutely do not utilize that. Like, the opportunities are being created, and it's not even just within the written space. I mean, most of us here are gamers, and looking at that, it's the same stuff. It's, Amazon Create Space is to independent authors as Steam is to an independent developer, to kind of just use a comparison there, where you can connect to your audience. It used to be back in the day that you had a lot of barriers to entry, first and foremost, just having access to those resources, right? That was a huge detriment for anyone who wanted to get their work out. And then turn around and you had gatekeepers, because publishers ended up being the ones that had access to those resources, and they said, well, look, I've got the time, I've got the money, I've got what you need, but I'm going to take most of what you make in order to push your work out there in front of an audience. And having more reach and things like that, and people conceded to that because they didn't have a choice. But now, the time in which we live, I don't need to go through a publisher to get stuff done. If I want to write a book and release that book, I can do that. It's just up to me to produce that very thing. And I'm in a position where I can completely go around those guys. And I think that frustrates so many of them. Kind of looking at the idea of crowdfunding that we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years with things like Kickstarter and just other crowdfunding methods, I recall seeing publishers scampering and not knowing what to do when especially someone who's very established as a content creator shows up on Kickstarter and says, I want to make this thing, I want to make this game, this is what I'm working on, and this is what we got to show so far, and people are just throwing money at them to the point where developers are not even beholden to a publisher, and they don't have to worry about meeting publisher standards. They can take a little bit more time and get that stuff done. And I've seen publishers just completely scampering and running in circles like, what do we do with this? What do we do? How can we take this and make it work somehow? I think I heard about an incident with Sega, who wanted to show up and publish for a developer, and they were basically saying, yeah, we're going to publish this for you, even though you kickstarted and you're fully funded. And the developer was like, well, what's in it for us? They're like, well, we're going to publish it, and we're going to take most of the money. And the developer's like, are you stupid? What are you talking about? I cannot remember the exact details of the story, but I saw that. I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
And the thing is, it used to be, when I was I was a computer science major, and I was learning programming before I realized that I hated it with a passion, and I didn't want to see it ever again. But in order to get started, you had to invest in buying your own, IDE if you wanted to do graphical development. It's an integrated development environment, and they were commercial programs that you had to invest a couple $100s in just to start getting off the ground to write Hello World. But now nowadays you can get, and I'm going to talk about the OS 10 platform because that's the one I'm most familiar with. Every single tool to develop any program for iPhones, iPads, or the Mac OS is available for free as a free download. The whole, the debugger, the compiler, the GUI to code everything. They just introduced a new language to work on top of C, an Objective-C called Swift that's entirely graphics oriented, that makes it very, very quick to program it's a pre-built physics engine and graphics display. So if you want to build a game, it makes it much easier to create it and deploy it. All of their documentation is available for free. They have groups where you can talk about, ask questions about your code, get feedback. All of that's available for free. They have all of their 12 volumes of Inside Mac OS 10 is available online for free. You can register as a developer for free. It costs more if you want to get the license to download stuff because they have to give you a certificate, but that costs $100 a year. $100 a year for them to validate a certificate for you to put your stuff on the App Store, and that is unimaginable when I started programming, which was in 1994. So, exactly 20 years ago. That is just mind-blowing that all this stuff is available for you. If you want to be a programmer, if you want to be a game developer, you can start right now, and they have everything available online for free. It's incredible. And I'm not saying that's the only one. I'm not trying to say that Apple's the only one who does that. I just know for a fact that Apple does do it.
I'm reminded of, I'm going to pull a Remy now, and I'm going to quote a movie that's very near and dear to my heart, Gattaca with Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke. And in that movie, it's a very long story short, but basically the movie is about a guy who wants to work at more or less an aerospace company called Gattaca, but he doesn't fit the genetic profile necessary to do so. And so he's faking his identity with someone who does have the genetic standards that are looked for. And one of the things that he ends up saying in regards to Jude Law, whose identity he's co-opted in order to succeed, he ends up kind of making some a mental thought about this. He says, I realized that Jerome had everything that he needed to succeed at Gattaca except the desire to do so. And most of the movie is just about those two characters growing, one getting to realize his dream and one living vicariously through the others. And he talks about how impressed he is. He's like, you're lending me your dream because I never wanted anything so badly as you do. And I guess more people kind of should take that stance. Right now you have everything. You have all the advantages necessary to get out there and be great and to fulfill those goals and fulfill those passions. If you want to make a game, damn it, sit down and go make a game. You have the tools. You have so many people around you who have already done it who can absolutely help you if you just ask them politely and say, I don't know what I'm doing, or I need help, or where should I look for help? And oftentimes people will provide that to you. Or same thing with books. If you want to write and you want to go through the whole creative process, there are people around. There are people who come to me for advice all the time, and they say, I don't know how to do any of this. How can I not mess this up? And I'm like, well, here you go. They're like, that's how you do it. Go be great. Just get it done. It's not that hard. So that's really frustrating for me, I guess, on a social level, to see how many people are being held back. Kind of, I guess they're leashed, but then you're realizing that they're the ones holding their own leash.
And that's even true for movies and stuff. You can shoot and produce a short or a movie for very, very cheap or free, with gear you already have right now. If you have a smartphone with a camera on it, the cameras on smartphones are good enough that they can shoot high enough quality to make a demo reel or even make a short you can put on YouTube. If you and you have nonlinear sound and video editing programs that are available for free. I'm not saying they're as good as the $1,000, $4,000 workstations that movie studios buy, but you can do something good enough to catch people's attention on YouTube, or we see that all the time with Underfoot and Monday Matt and Sargon and so on and so forth, or to put a demo reel together to go to film school to get a scholarship, or to put a demo reel together to go get hired by somebody. I mean, the tools to do this are available, and they are very, very cheap or free. And the only thing in your way is you deciding to actually get over that hump of being scared and go out and start creating something. It had never in the history of the world has there been as much stuff given to you to go and create if that's really what you want to do.
And on that subject, Daddy, wow, oh, that's so awkward. I'm like, hey, Daddy. Oh, wow. But on that subject, that's the key thing, and I want to, kind of address that. Talking about being afraid. Here's the key thing, and if you've never heard it before, you're hearing it now for the first time. Every single time a creative person sits down and goes through that process and finishes that work and releases it, we are terrified. I have never spoken to another creative who didn't say that they were absolutely scared. We are afraid of being judged. We're afraid that we've made such a colossal blunder that we're going to be laughed at. We're just absolutely afraid of just not being good enough. We are our own greatest critics, and you have to learn to get over that hump. I do my own little YouTube show of, Three Dogs Gamergate News Radio, just GNR. I am absolutely I'm just scared to death every time I start doing that. And I just do it anyway because it's scary to think of within the context of your total life. And imagine when your days are winding down and you're not going to be here much longer. It's so much scary to think of what my life would be like if I hadn't tried on so many different fronts. I am terrified of the thought of I always wanted to write and release my own book, to sit in the same category as someone like H.G. Wells, or to sit there alongside Philip K. Dick in my material, and now I do. That's like, holy cow, that's one of the most amazing things that's happened to me, and for better or worse, I did it. It's done. It's, notch in the belt, and I don't have to worry about, oh, I didn't get that one thing done. No, this is something I got done, and you do have to take that charge, and you do have to at least have the self-esteem to try, and be prepared to fail. You will mess stuff up. It's okay. That's called learning. And the only way you fail is if you don't pay attention to why you messed up and realize what you could do better. And really what makes you a great creative is getting in there, messing up, learning the hard way, and then you go, you get up, you dust your butt off from getting knocked down, and you go right back at it and try again. That's how it's done.
And being professionally creative is not an easy thing. You guys talk about all of these tools and everything that are available to people now, but even just in writing, I write for myself. I am sure I will never be published. The things that I write, I'm not sure would make sense to a general audience, and I think a lot of authors have mastered that, being able to write to an audience, which is important. But there is a huge amount of I don't know if risk is the right word, but it's the only one that I can think of, in being creative and making that your livelihood, because there's so many different variables that go into it, and most folks, the writers that I know, not so much you, Oliver, because you have enough swagger for all of us, but most of the creative writers I know have just such crippling self-doubt, and it takes so much to get just as a friend to be able to read their manuscripts that it's a fight. It's just like, dude, I'm not going to say anything, give me the book. Like, just hand it over. Give me the drive, give me the papers, give me it now. I want to read the story. And I even think about just posting up, a creative role play on a fan site or anything like that, and that, like, oh God, people are reading my words, and the fact that you can jump over that hurdle and put your work out there, and I just have such huge respect for that, because it's something that I couldn't imagine doing, be it creating a game or anything else. That ability to put yourself on the line is huge to me.
And that's the thing, Remy. And basically, when we finish this, now I'm going to start bugging you to get your work done and get it published. And if I have to help you do that, then so be it. And like I said, for better or worse. And that's really the key thing. In fact, my best friend is actually watching the show that we're doing right now, and he's there. So he saw me go through this entire process. And well, it's even funnier if for people that didn't know, I was actually in the middle of organ failure while writing my first book and getting that done. So I was laid in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines and IVs and stuff like that, and I was just like, I have nowhere else to be. I was a little preoccupied, so I was like, okay, let's just keep working on it and getting it done. And people are going to judge you. That's the key to getting past that fear hurdle that you were talking about, and that self-awareness. And I sat down and I was like, people are going to judge me. But then something clicked in my head and I said, people are always judging me, no matter what. Like, no matter how hard you try, someone somewhere doesn't like you, doesn't like the things that you're saying. They hate your face. They hate anything that you do. They hate you because you're breathing. And once you realize that, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm just going to go do what I'm going to do, haters be damned, and you just do it, you will realize that there are so many people who need to hear what you have to say, and they were just waiting for that chance to hear you. True story of what ended up happening after the first book came out. I was at a friend's wedding, probably a year after the fact, and no, let me think. No, it was definitely more than that. It was close to 2 years, actually. And, I was just doing the thing. I was one of the groomsmen, and several ladies came up to me and said, your book was one of the most important things I've ever read in my life. And I was like, who are you? I didn't know, but people were like, oh yeah, that's that guy that wrote that one book about that lady. And there was another lady who came up and said, the book was so important that it made her decide to take some agency of her own life and stop being abused in the relationship that she was in. Whether you believe it or not, the things that you write down have an absolute impact on people's lives, and if you do it right, you will make good changes. What makes all this worth it for me? It doesn't matter if you sell 80 million units. It doesn't matter. The key thing for me was to think, if I can change one person's life by creating this work, everything else is worth it. All the hardship, everything else. Someone sat down and said, this means a lot to me. And to help people have an idea of the context of how impactful that can be on you as a creator, I want you to look around all your homes right now. Most of you are probably sitting at the computer or maybe in your living rooms or offices and things like that. Usually most people are around their own favorite entertainment content. I mean, hell, sitting right here, I am literally sitting within arm's reach of hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of different entertainment medium. Every person has a limited amount of time on Earth, and no one knows how much of that time they get. It's a wild shot in the dark. You might get 80 years, you might get 20 or 30. You don't know. So when people sit down and they find your entertainment, medium, product, whatever, and they make a very conscious choice to invest that time that they can never get back on your work. And as you look around, your rooms, and you look around and just take into consideration the entertainment medium you have, the key thing for me as a writer was realizing that people have thousands of choices of things to use their time on, and people decided over all others, over huge corporations, over these huge media conglomerates, they decided that my work was the best use of their time. And I'm just some random ass guy with, horrible pain sitting in the middle of Iowa. It's amazing to think about that.
But I think it's wonderful that even after the creative process, like, you have a connection with your audience and with your readers. This is going to date me a lot, but my absolute favorite writer is Anne Rice. I am a big vampire nerd, and it's whatever. Everybody can make fun of me on the Twitter later. And I had the joy of talking with her a couple of times at book signings and then actually at her home. And she is one of those writers that I continue to love because she is so grateful. It's not even appreciative, but it goes into the realm of grateful because she's been through so much in her life, and lost so much, and she's quick to recognize that in others and really thank them for spending time with her characters and with her work. And there's other authors that I liked that I would read their work and be like, oh, this is really good. And I would go to a signing. Are book signings even still a thing? Like, am I really dating myself a ton?
Yeah, that's still a thing. You're not
Okay. Okay. But there were other authors who I would go to signings, and they were just so disconnected and seemed bored, and like they didn't want to be there with people. And she would stand up and hug people and just really interact. And there would be literally thousands of people there to see her, and I couldn't imagine how exhausting that entire situation would be. And she was just always so gracious and so welcoming, and that made me love her words even more and connect to them even more. And I think that that's important with the creative arts, because when you read a book and when you read something, a lot, at least for me as a reader, a lot of who I am goes into it, and I take away a lot from it as well. And to know that the author understands that and feels that, just it makes it so much better.
Absolutely. It's really, really important. I would say for the ones who haven't developed a huge ego in realizing that each individual reader, each person who connects to you through the content that you make, matters. They really, really do matter. Every single time I sit down and get a review, it's one of the most important things that happens to me that day. And I look at what they're saying, and I take that in because I want to be able to do my job better every single time. And even the bad reviews and people who had a disappointing experience, it still matters. And I think that one of the key things with connecting with your audience and working with different human beings, in that sense, different people, is just looking at that, looking at that situation. Every single person on this planet, I think, just wants to feel like their existence is validated by someone giving them that attention and saying, hey, I see that you're here and you've got your own thing, and I think that's really cool. One of the things that I've experienced is just when I interact with my fan base, which is really weird because I was not expecting them to be my audience. My audience actually turns out to most of the time be 35 plus years old. I think in the upper limits, my fans are like 70 years old, 70-year-old women. And it's like, okay, like you weren't the group I was intending to hit, but that is my audience. And just taking that time and say, yeah, we've all got these different experiences, and I actually appreciate you taking the time to just read what I've created and valuing that time. I think that's really the most important thing. Don't take your customers, don't take your audience for a ride. They're the ones who make you important. Like, they are the ones who let you have your job or follow your passion or follow your dream. Those people, and you should not spit in their face, and you should take the things that they say seriously because, well, we see what fandoms are like. When people are really committed to a content creator or a piece of content that they love, they go all the way. I mean, hell, even, that's everyone. That's even myself. I got this huge Mega Man tattoo on my inner left forearm, and then I'm going to be getting another tattoo here in about a week of Little Mac from Punch-Out, because it's a huge thing for me. It's something that mattered in my life, and whether you realize it or not, you know, even if you're just a novice or a budding content creator, you can affect people's lives on that level. But you need to ask yourself, do I want to affect people's lives or potentially affect their lives on that level? And will you? And if you don't know that you can do it, then you might have to take another look at that. But the worst thing that you could do is sell yourself short and just not do it.
There are a lot of things when you get into issues of the relationship between a creator and the audience that are, you know, really, really complicated and really, really easy to misunderstand. And whenever I make a statement about them, somebody comes along and says, well, what about this? Which I did mention, but they didn't get it out of it. So I want to state this very, very carefully so that people understand what I'm saying. If you're a creator and you're making something, you have every right to make that the way you want. That's your thing. You can do it however you want. At the same time, if you're making something for an audience, there is also a responsibility that you have to the people who are your audience. And it's exactly what you were saying. You know, you can't spit in their faces. You can't, or at least you shouldn't. Doing that is wrong. You are creating something not just for yourself. You're creating something for other people. And you don't have to. If you want to just write your own stuff and not share it, that's fine. That's entirely your choice. But if you're creating something for an audience, and let's say, you know, you're writing a book series or whatever, and you're writing book 7, you do have a responsibility to the people that you're writing for. You have a responsibility to your audience. And this is the point where someone jumps in and says, what, you're saying they have control? I'm like, no, I'm not saying the audience has control. I'm not saying you have to listen to them if they demand things, but you have to make your own choices for the material you create. At the same time, there is a responsibility there, and being, you know, slapping your audience in the face, spitting on them, whatever, is being abusive towards your audience is actually a bad thing. You're not just, by the time you're publishing the 7th book in a series, you're not just doing this for yourself. You've chosen to enter into a relationship with your audience, and there is a relationship there that you have some responsibility for. It's not all about you anymore. And I think that egocentrism, where it's not an ego of, oh yes, I'm so awesome, but the egocentrism of, I'm the only person in the world who matters, and none of these other people who buy my books or watch my movies or listen to my music or whatever, none of them matter because I'm the only person who matters. That kind of egocentric view of the artist and the creator has become almost the default, almost the righteous view, the moral view, that if you talk against that, you're seen as trying to censor or limit or oppress the artist, and that is absolutely not what it is at all.
Well, I think that there's a fine line, though. I mean this with the utmost respect for J.K. Rowling. I'm going to put that out there first. I am a huge Potter nerd. I come from that fandom. You can Google, there's bad fanfic out there. With J.K. Rowling, she has a wonderful relationship with her audience, which I really greatly appreciate, but those last 2 books read like fanfics. And yes, they were great stories, but she had a very strong and definitive voice. And I love writers who have strong voices that as soon as you read a sentence, you go, oh, this person wrote that. Anne Rice does that. Hemingway is another one that I enjoy that has a very strong voice to their writing. Neil Gaiman. And it's something that I enjoy, and she had a very strong voice, but she became so in tune with her audience that I feel like she watered that down. There's a few other, Cassandra St. Clair, a few other authors that I can think of that they spend time in their fandom, and they post on fan forums and do all of these wonderful things that I think are great, but in the process, because they were still writing the series, they ended up sort of watering down what made them so unique and so great. So it's having that fan element and that awareness is good, but at the same time, keeping a strong sense of self, I think, is really important for a writer.
You know, I think there's a reason for that. What you're describing is something that I observed myself, and it made me very hyper-aware and taking the stance and the positions that I just talked about and making sure that I adhered to that standard always. one of the key things that I've seen and it's not even just with authors, it's just content creators. You notice how it's whenever it's the little guy, the underdog comes out, just as you said with J.K. Rowling, where she didn't even have heat in her apartment. She began Harry Potter writing in, what was it, coffee shops and whatnot, and she was just absolutely down. There are so many stories where people have created this thing and turned it into something beautiful, something full of passion and wonder and excitement, and so many people were just drawn to that. There's so much energy there. And what ends up, I think that what causes that is that you realize when you've got to give it everything you have, you've got to give 120%, you have to give more than anyone else is even willing to do, because you're going up against such unfathomable odds of success, and you've got to do it. You've got to do it. And I think that's where the wonderful, incredible stuff comes from. It's kind of like go back in time and look at Star Wars, especially with the age of the crowd that we have here tonight, as well as us here on your panel. We're sitting here, and so many people can tell you about old classic Star Wars, and that was when George Lucas was small and he was tiny and he was just one little guy, and then it blew up into this wonderful, amazing thing, and people just fell in love with this whole universe and this the canon and just everything about it. But then as George Lucas got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, the quality started to come down significantly. I shouldn't have to tell anyone about how Star Wars fans reacted to the new trilogy that's been around, and I just seeing that kind of disappointment, not just in J.K. Rowling, not just with George Lucas, but with just so many different creative types who started off so small. And I think part of that disappointment from their audiences also comes from they feel like they disconnected. There's a disconnect between the creator and that person where they don't feel like us. It's no longer we. It's now me and the person that makes that stuff. They don't feel like that they can talk to that person and share their minds or thoughts. It's kind of like the difference between just us all regular, average, everyday people and celebrities. I'm making air quotes right now, but nobody can see that. And how it's almost like a class problem,
Okay, we have 2 minutes left of the show.
Boss runs a
minutes.
tight
Good
ship.
conversation.
Boss runs a very tight ship. He does. Real quick, before we go, can I do a totally off-topic? Fighting game tournament dates have been announced for 2015. Are there any that you are going to be attending, Mr. Campbell?
No, because I'm not cool. Unless something incredible happens, and like suddenly, I can end up going, then I would show up. But I mean, it's not currently in the cards. But I can't say no. That's never going to happen. So.
Right now, we'll put it out there. If we have to crowdfund you going to EVO July 17th to the 19th, it's got to be a thing. It's got to be.
Oh. Well, then, I guess I'm getting told what's going down in July.
Any last comments from the panel before I close it out?
Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night. Be safe and be good to each other.
Well, thanks for letting me be on and usurp the entire space, it seems.
I think you played my part tonight, Oliver. Thank you very much.
Oh, good.
Thanks for coming on, Oliver. All right, folks, this is Geek Gab, the Geekarific Gabfest. I'm the host, Daddy Warpig, my co-hosts, RemipunX, Stream Mom, and Dorrinal. Thank you all for tuning in. We are on Sunday nights, 1 hour, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel to get email updates as to when we will be on. In addition, if you want to keep track of any of us on Twitter, all of our Twitter handles are in the description of the show. And last but not least, you can follow my blog, The House of Geekery, one daily geek post. It's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Something fun, something cool, something quick that will lift you up, make you happy, give you a smile that day. I'm Daddy Warpig. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. Had a lot of fun. Next week, we have a super secret AAA developer guest. No big reveal. We're not going to tell you their identity, but you can ask questions that you've always wanted to ask of a AAA developer right here, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in 1 week. We are Geekarific Gabfest, and we will be back.